Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Meggett as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Meggett, CEO of Collaborative Compositions. And today I've got with us a special guest, Graham Plaster. Graham, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you so much for letting me on your podcast, Chelsea. It's an honor. Currently, I am the director of Nautilus, which is what you call a PIA, Partnership Intermediary Agreement, which is basically in shorthand, it's a public-private partnership between a nonprofit called DefenseWorks down in Florida and the Navy. And some people that listen to your podcast might have heard of SoftWorks or some of those other groups, and we're in that same family of relationships that try to bring emerging technologies to the warfighter.
Fantastic. So defense innovation. I love this topic. It's a great one. How did you get involved in that? What's a little bit of your background, your history?
Yeah, it's a long, winding journey for me. I graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy right after 9/11. I went to my first ship out in Hawaii and deployed to the Arabian Gulf and was there for Operation Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom. And then came back, went on another ship down to South America, did counter-drug operations. And then from there went to the Naval War College, where I was the assistant dean of students for 3 years and got picked up for a special program in the Navy called the Foreign Area Officer Program. I went off to learn some Arabic, studied a little bit of Farsi, and then got stationed at the Pentagon for 3 years doing liaison work with the United Nations in the Middle East. So I would fly back and forth to Israel, Jordan, Iraq, Kenya, and Egypt on a regular basis to do liaison work with the embassies and with the United Nations, and also with our U.S. military observers that we would send to those areas. So I did that until 2013, got out and started a company called the Intelligence Community Inc., which is a social network for national security. And that currently reaches around 150,000 people. And then I went back to work at the Pentagon as a policy advisor for 6 years in the Office of Secretary of Defense, OSD, and did that. And then at the same time, kept my eye open for what was next. So in 2019, I became a vice president of an Alaska Native corporation and ran one of their subsidiaries, did some business development for them, and then left there and started consulting for emerging tech companies, specifically AI companies trying to sell into government. And also did a little bit of tech scouting for AR, VR tech for the Pentagon for a little while, spoke at some conferences on AR and VR. And then after that, tried to raise a venture fund called Expeditionary Ventures. That was right at the beginning of COVID, and it wasn't successful. So we pivoted that to be a syndicate. And then 3 years ago, I became the director of Nautilus.
Wow, that is quite a long and winding road, and especially within defense. I think you've mentioned on our calls, you host these fantastic weekly calls, just everybody, so they know, get on the Silicon Nation Monday night calls. Those are fantastic. You've mentioned a couple of times that you do still work with some of our foreign allies. I'm curious, how involved are you in foreign military sales and working with some of our allies in tech development?
As a foreign area officer back in 2010, I joined the board for the association, the FAO Association, and I was on that board for 14 years. I was the editor of their journal. I was the webmaster. I held many different positions. I just left that board a couple months ago, but because of my longstanding position on that board, I do have a lot of relationships in foreign military sales, and because of my positions as a FAO, traveling back and forth to the Middle East, and then also as a reservist now, I'm the deputy director for Israel for the Office of Naval Research Global. And so I've spent some time in Israel this summer doing some liaison work there with emerging technology companies. But to answer your question, if anyone of your listeners is interested in ITAR, I can definitely introduce them to people that are in that space.
Interesting. I know that there's a bunch of listeners who are definitely interested in getting some exposure to that foreign military service and sales sort of area. So definitely reach out to Graham if you've got questions on that. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing with Nautilus now.
So Nautilus, as a public-private partnership, we support the Naval Surface Warfare Division in Dahlgren, Virginia, and they have about a $2.4 billion a year R&D budget. We just connected to them in February of 2024. Before that, we were attached to Naval X, if anyone's familiar with that. And so Dahlgren is leveraging us to host a lot of webinars for tech scans. We try to go out and find emerging tech companies that aren't necessarily in the GovCon space to get them to present to government leaders in the Navy and the Marine Corps. But we can host what we call collaboration events, where if the government has a funded problem that they haven't been able to solve through regular government contracting, they can bring it to us. We're a non-FAR tool that they can use, and we can host a 2 to 3 day event and bring in a lot of non-traditional companies, and then allow the government and those companies to have conversations. And at the end of that, we can facilitate prototyping through our PIA. And so the government can put money into the PIA, and then we can hire the companies to build prototypes or tailor their product for a government use case. From there, they can take it anywhere they want. They can take it into an OTA, they can take it into a FAR-based contract, and we are a neutral middle partner, and we step back from it at that point. But we're basically the catalyst, like, to take the training wheels off a non-traditional emerging tech company so that they can get involved with the government.
Interesting. I love that. There's so many non-traditionals out there, and non-traditionals being those companies that haven't worked with the federal government before, haven't had federal defense contracts before. There's so many of them out there that are really looking for that in and that connection to the problem set that they're looking to solve. So that's a fantastic resource to have. What kind of technologies are you guys primarily looking at these days?
So Dahlgren is actually very broad in its technology areas. They are interested in almost everything except submarines. If you go to their website, Naval Surface Warfare Division Dahlgren, they have what are called thrust areas, and those cover cyber, sensors, autonomy, drones, hypersonics, you name it. And then from there, they're connected to an OTA called NISTIC. And if you were to go to the NISTIC website, you can look at all the areas that NISTIC funds and the amount of money that is flowing through that OTA. It covers quite a lot of technology stacks. So we're happy to talk to any technology company. If you come to us and you're straight submarine tech, we'll vector you off to another group. But honestly, there's a lot of technology that Dahlgren is interested in to see.
Interesting. Now, you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I'm sure that there's folks out there that don't necessarily know what the acronym is. So can you tell us a little bit more about OTAs?
Yeah, other OTAs are other transaction authorities or other transaction agreements. They've been interpreted in both ways, and they go back a couple decades. Really were designed for NASA to try to get to the best technology the fastest, and they're designed also for R&D type situations. I'm not a legal expert on OTAs. I have hosted some different people on webinars that are, and I can definitely refer people that want to go deeper in OTAs, but OTAs can work very well with PIAs, and a PIA can operate as a pilot light to get something going, and then an OTA can take it forward. Because it is a contract, but it's outside the FAR, it can provide a lot of flexibility. And if you Google OTA consortia, nowadays there's a couple websites that have aggregated a long list of OTAs and OTA groups that you can join to learn more about them.
Interesting. I personally am a huge advocate and fan of OTAs. I think they're a fantastic tool for those out there who don't necessarily fit into the natural or typical constraints that the FAR can typically put on companies. That's definitely one of those more flexible, typically easier to operate in vehicles to work within. Have you found that you've had several companies, or what's the success level of your OTA currently with Dahlgren?
Right now, because we're just brand new connected to Dahlgren, we're just getting our feet wet to connect with their OTA, but we have done some briefings where we've educated the government and educated the private sector on how to use a PIA and go into an OTA.
Fantastic. That's lessons that I think every government customer needs to have, is they just ultimately not comfortable, not familiar, or not really sure how to properly use these things. So that's a fantastic service that you're providing. Tell us a little bit more about your out-of-work hobbies. Some of these things, I met you, I think, honestly, because it was like in the heat of COVID. you had put on this fantastic bourbon tasting
Mm.
and you mailed out little bottles of bourbon that you had labeled with specific companies. And that was such a fantastic experience going through that. I don't think I'd ever seen anything done like that before. So tell us a little bit more about what your Silicon Nation's up to.
Yeah. So at the beginning of COVID, I would say that back in 2013, when I launched the Intelligence Community Inc., I was hosting monthly happy hours in DC, and they got really large. We got 200 to 300 people coming to some of them. And then as my career took me in different directions, I started to wind that down a bit. And then COVID happened and live events was not a thing, right? And so I launched a new company called Bonaventure. And out of that, Silicon Nation, the newsletter, and I have a podcast. And then we've done some live and virtual events out of that. And it's a small side thing, but it's grown. And the Monday night virtual happy hours have become a staple. So we've done that in order to create a sense of community, like a cheers environment for people that are in the defense tech space or in the entrepreneurial space to just come together, share ideas, share a drink over the screen, and hopefully collaborate and find some synergy there. That's what we've done. And Silicon Nation right now as a newsletter reaches about 30,000 readers. And we've had some special people on Monday nights. We've had General Petraeus on, and on a regular basis, we have technologists and investors and things like that.
And that's a fantastic group of people to come to get to know. The regularity with which you all come together and the frequency, providing that forum for folks to have discussions around defense tech and emerging technologies and how they're being integrated and what the future's holding. And we'll ultimately, I think, get to look at our crystal balls a little bit in that call and give each other some feedback, which I really appreciate, honestly. I got to ask you, give us a little taste of your crystal ball. What are you seeing with the new administration? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with Elon Musk in there and Doge, we're going to see a lot of cutting of waste. But on the same token, I think there's going to be an emphasis on technology. I think with connections to SpaceX and Tesla and things like that, and tie-ins to the whole PayPal mafia through Peter Thiel and Joe Lonsdale, et cetera, we're going to see more companies like Anduril, Palantir emerging. I think we'll see a realignment of the prime landscape over the next 10 years. On the same token, I think some of the existing primes will probably try to reinvent themselves in some ways. So we'll see what happens. There's obviously an emphasis on AI right now, and we'll see if that's a bubble of any type now that DeepSeek has come out and there's kind of an AI race to the bottom on price. As far as military tech is concerned, I've been saying this for a long time, but we are approaching a time when national security tech and critical infrastructure tech is military tech, and that dual use really has no meaning anymore because all technology is useful everywhere, except for maybe certain exquisite missiles. Really what we're talking about is dual market. Can you sell a technology in both the private and the public sector? And the only thing that really holds you back is your ability to communicate the value proposition, because most technologies are valuable everywhere if you can show the use case. So when it comes to military tech and the way forward, I think we will see much more of a blending between the public and private sector. And this whole dual use tech mentality, I think the term itself will become a little bit like the word innovation. It'll become a little bit meaningless.
A little bit theater-like, if you will.
Right.
Yeah. I saw an interesting statistic the other day, and it really put it into perspective for me how big our federal industrial base is comparatively to the economy. And there's 33 million small businesses in the United States, and 0.2% of them, 0.2, actually participate in the federal industrial base. 0.2% of them are providing any products, services to the federal government. Do you think that's going to increase over the next several years?
I think it could. Silicon Nation just put out an article on the possible increase of the military budget to over $1 trillion.
That 5%, right?
Yeah. So I think what's interesting is as we look at cutting costs in some places, we could see a neocon movement with new technology in defense. Now, will that go to the primes or will it be decentralized across a lot of small businesses that are doing innovation? Will it go to R&D? I don't know. We'll see.
That's a very interesting place to look and try to foreshadow a little bit. Definitely I would like to see a greater increase in participation and hopefully less shriveling of our industrial base over the next 4 years with the implementation of some hopefully streamlined and smoothed processes for businesses trying to work with the government. What's the biggest thing that surprised you so far about this administration?
Surprised me is just the speed of action. They've done a lot of executive orders in a short amount of time.
Yeah.
That's been interesting.
It's been really quick. You're in the DC area, you've got the Beltway feel. I'm obviously across the country. What's your emotional sense right now within that community? Are folks running around with their hairs on fire, or is everybody just bracing for the best? How many of your friends have left the federal government so far?
Yeah, I'm watching it on social media, honestly. I haven't talked to a lot of people that are in critical kind of situations. I wouldn't call it critical because I think that they've been given up to 9 months of paid leave if they want to leave,
Sure.
which is a pretty nice cushion to transition. Yeah. On the other hand, I have seen some social media posts of people that are up in arms and concerned about different agency closures and things like that. But no, I try to keep my head out of the emotion and try to keep out of the political conversations.
That's definitely smart. They can drag you down if you let them.
Yeah.
So how have you seen the drive to technology differ or change over the past couple of years? You mentioned that you've done some talks on AR, VR, and giving some insights into that. And I feel like those were pretty hot topics maybe 2-3 years ago. Have you seen any change, or have they implemented any of that? Are we moving towards more advanced futuristic technologies and implementations of them, or are we still dawdling around the same things that we've been talking about for years?
When it comes to AR, VR, the military has always been at the cutting edge of that with flight simulators for training and things like that. They have ship simulators for training. And if you go back also to the F-35, the Rockwell Collins heads-up display is basically AR. They don't describe it that way, but it's a $200,000 helmet, and it's got all kinds of technology in it. We have been using AR, VR in the military for a long time. How much will it advance? I'm not really sure. It really comes back to the salesmanship, the use case, because I know Magic Leap did a big contract, I think, with Navy for a while back. I'm not sure how far they've gotten with that. And for other types of technologies, we look at drones or things like that. And the thing to be concerned about is there's a couple stumbling blocks. One is integration between platforms that are commercial. Let's say we go out into the field and we have all these different small businesses that all have different technologies, but they don't interoperate. What's the platform to rule them all? What pulls it all together and makes them all talk and make sense of all the signals? Another thing is just the race to the bottom on price, because sometimes the government has done lowest price, technically acceptable, and you don't want to go to the moon with that type of contract. You want something that's the best in breed technology, even if it's a little more expensive. So you got to figure out the right price point. And at that point, you have to bring in technology people with the contracting people in the same room. When you're doing business development with the government, there's the person with the money, there's the person that understands the tech, and then there's usually like the champion who might be like a senior executive or an admiral or a general. And all those people have to be like talking with each other, and you have to be able to move the needle with all three gatekeepers in order to get in the door. And that's complex. It's hard for small businesses to do.
That's really hard. And I think the integration piece is probably got to be even harder. And I can't imagine what it's like from the government side, trying to look at a field of all small businesses, all trying to come out on top, all trying to compete with each other when their technologies, they may all have a place on the battlefield, but they are ultimately not integrated. They're not talking to each other. They're all individual kind of siloed technologies. So do you see a gap in the integration piece there? Do you see that being something that could be filled by other companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Software companies can definitely do integrations. I know of some companies, and I won't name them, that are building platforms for integrations across different things. And a lot of companies that have autonomous systems or they have drone platforms, they are trying to make their systems interoperable with other systems. There is an effort to do that.
I would like to think so. I'd like to hope that's in the back of every small business's mind, that ultimately this will have to fit in somewhere and we'll have to work with other things. And how do we figure out how to do that? I think it's got to be a common problem amongst small technology developers. Mm-hmm. What are you looking forward to next?
So with Dahlgren, we are trying to host webinars for each of their thrust areas and trying to bring in these emerging tech companies. So if you go to nautilus22.org, you'll see us starting to advertise those things. And there's also a button on that website that says join the ecosystem. So if you're listening to the podcast, if you go to nautilus22.org and you're an emerging tech company and you want to join the ecosystem, totally free, you can fill out the form, puts you in our database, and you'll start getting emails about our events. You might get an invitation to come and do a demo to government leaders, and that could lead to a contract. What we're trying to do is build an ecosystem of non-traditional tech companies and make sure that they have opportunities and make sure we cut through some of the red tape.
Do they have to be located by Dahlgren? Do they have to be in that area?
No, they don't. And actually, they can be international companies. We just have to obviously work through all the requirements.
Okay. So there is an open door there for opportunities to engage with you and the Dahlgren team. That's fantastic. What's your next upcoming?
We have one next week that's focused on antenna technologies. And then we have some with robotics coming up. And then, like I said, if you join our email list, you'll see all the other topics as they start to pop up.
That's fantastic. So folks that want to get connected with the Dahlgren and the Navy ecosystem, and maybe folks that have questions about where their technology fits within that ecosystem or how they can best leverage their technology in support of the Navy and Dahlgren ecosystem, they can all reach out to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive.
Fantastic. And that's Graham Plaster on LinkedIn. This is fantastic, Graham. I am definitely looking forward to jumping on one of those webinars. I'd definitely love to connect with you and the Dahlgren team to see what you guys have going on over there at your tech demos and so forth. And I'd love to stay connected.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chelsea.
Fantastic. We'll definitely have folks reach out to you and we'll get all of the links that you mentioned in the show notes. Thank you so much for the conversation, Graham. This was fantastic. We'll have to have you back on the show.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Meggett. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.